Will do.
Perfect. And
Live now.
no, perfect. Hi guys, welcome to this evening's debate. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to have a debate on the topic of is Britain institutionally racist? So far we have Mahyar Tousi here, a prominent conservative YouTuber, and we're still waiting for Sasha Johnson, a prominent Black Lives Matter activist, to come along. Moderating, we have Pastor Andrew, who's a great man who's done a lot of charity work throughout the coronavirus pandemic. What we're going to do is at 7 o'clock, we're going to sort of just get started, and hopefully Sasha's going to tune in. If not, again, hopefully she will. So over to you, Andrew. Oh, and the last thing I have to say is any views expressed on this debate tonight do not represent Turning Point. They are the views of the guests only.
Well, a warm welcome to everyone listening, wherever you are. And I am to be neutral this evening. I'm a neutral moderator. My role is to try and bridge the gap, if possible, between the two sides. And I want to be the voice of the audience, you at home or around the world, wherever you're listening to this from or watching this from, many of whom will be undecided, or you'll be unsure or uninformed about these issues. And there are many who don't really know what's going on, but their lives have been invaded by this question and this topic at hand tonight. So I would ask at this stage that all parties, and I will ask again, keep this discussion to a very high standard. We want to avoid personal attacks. We want to avoid foul language and anything like that that will hinder the message coming across loud and clear, because hopefully this will be shared to other groups of all ages and other cultures. And it's great to have the message come across really clearly without being clouded by anything that would be considered to be below par. So I don't know if it's appropriate at this stage to try and find out a little bit about our two debaters this evening. Obviously, Sasha's not here, but if it's okay with you, Mahyar, can I start with you? Can you just take a minute or so just to tell the audience a bit about who you are for those who don't know who you are and what you represent?
Yep, thanks for having me. I'm Mahyar Tousi. I'm a political YouTuber and broadcaster. I'm politically wise, I'm a classical liberal conservative YouTuber. I was actually born in Iran. My mother came here as a political refugee, and so obviously this country gave me and my family a second chance, a fresh start to live in a peaceful and free country. And so obviously I'm grateful, and I've dedicated my life to ensure that we keep this country safe and peaceful, and try to have political discussions based on facts and reason.
Great, Mahyar. So Sasha's not here yet. We hope that she will join us and she will be able to give an introduction about who she is when she arrives and what she represents. But I want us to get straight into the discussion because of time, if that's possible. And I'm going to start by asking you, Mahyar, the question at hand. And if possible, give 2 or 3 clear reasons why you're going to respond the way that you're going to respond. And if possible, point to sources of any facts and information that you give so the audience can carry out their own investigations after this debate. So Mahyar, here is the question. And everybody who's listening at home, I think you can get involved through the media that's been supplied. So feel free to do that. Again, keep it to a high standard. But here's the question. Is Britain institutionally racist?
No, I was going to say no, next question, but you did actually say you have to explain why. So yes, absolutely not. If the question is obviously institutionally or systemically, if the country is racist, we know that that's not true because of not just the data that we have, but also you can see it every day in your life. You don't necessarily need just the stats, which I'm going to obviously give you. This is the same country that decided to, with all the past and history that we have, like any other country and any other nation and culture, this country decided to, abolish slavery at a cost of obviously having the government and politicians sacrificing a lot of things at the time. It wasn't easy to do at the time. This was, this cost the country £20 million, and which was about 40% of the government expenditure, 5% GDP. And the whole point of this is that institutions, whether it's the police, whether it's governmental bodies, whether it's, for example, the NHS or the media, we have absolutely no evidence. Not just that, this is the country that, if you're talking about, for example, the Black community, we have 3% Black people in this country. But in terms of BAME, basically anyone who's non-white, obviously we have 13%. And the whole situation is that when you look at organizations like the BBC, that's an institutional media outlet, the BBC are currently at 13% non-white people working there in terms of obviously the shows and everything that they have. And at the same time, this is the same BBC that are spending about £100 million on a diversity program. This same could apply, obviously, this is the data that comes from the BBC itself. The same could apply to everything else that you have. So I'm more than happy to answer any specific questions in terms of if there are any specific institutions or governmental bodies that are being accused of being racist, and I'm more than happy to respond to that.
I suppose one question that a lot of people are asking, which you see examples of on media, on the mainstream media especially with that, we're sticking with what happened with what's here in the UK.
Yeah.
But what's here in the UK at the moment has been triggered, if you like, by what's happened in the States in recent months. And one of the main targets of criticism is the police. And you get, especially maybe in London and other big cities, Birmingham, where I am, the sense that the police perhaps stop and search and all those kind of things. And we've seen recently with high prominent politicians being stopped or whatever. What's your response to that for people who say, well, that's an example?
Well, the people who bring up stop and search, for example, and the police behavior in this country, that's nonsense, because firstly, the British police is the best police force in the world in terms of it's literally there to maintain peace. And up to a point where sometimes we criticize them, the people who are pro law and order, for being too soft. And sometimes they actually, they try to act as if we have a police state. We saw what happened during the lockdown when they were using their drones, and that was like a desperate attempt by the police to have a nanny state. But that's the best they could do. In terms of stop and search, firstly, this is a method that we know it works, and we know we have already improved it since we first developed it years ago. When it first came out, we needed some reform, and we did it. The fact that the police and the government did reform it, that means it's not institutional racist. They listen to the concerns. Secondly, 20% of stop and search, obviously, incidents lead to arrest. This is again coming from the Met Police as well. You could find out, obviously, I'll send a link on Twitter as well for everybody to see. One issue is the people who claim that stop and search is racist. No, because we have to understand how stop and search actually works. It depends on where it is. So, for example, half of stop and search incidents actually happen in London. And London, you have a lot of non-white people, like myself. I have been stop and search a couple of times. A couple of years ago, when you had the rise of kind of Islamist terrorism, and the police stopped me and politely actually said, "We've been warned about this area this time, and can we just check, who you are, what's happening?" And I cooperated and I moved on. If you go to Glasgow, all the stop and search are primarily white people. So it really depends on where you are and what actually happens. So it's definitely not racist.
So you've cited those incidents. You've said it's happened to you, right? What about some of the unresolved cases? I'm going back and things like Stephen Lawrence and others like that. And even more recently, the athlete who was stopped and that horrible situation that we saw in the back of the car. And I think an apology was given. How do you convince the majority of people out there that what you're saying isn't just propaganda, but it's it's actually affecting people who are of that background?
Well, you basically gave the answer in your own question in a way that you said when bad incidents had happened, the police have issued apology. When things like Stephen Lawrence and other incidents happen historically, the police, after the inquest and inquiries, they've reformed the system. And also, if there were individuals who were not a good egg. They got kind of obviously dealt with. The fact that we are able to do this in this country, the fact that we live in a free country that is able to learn from mistakes and reform it and evolve it, that means we are not institutionally racist. We're not saying this is no country, no nation or culture is perfect, no system is perfect. But this is about the fact that if this was systemically a messed up country, then the system and institutions would have had all these cover-ups and never had any reforms.
I think as well, it's important to note, sorry, it's not so much whether there is racism in a country, because you can't eliminate racism, that's utopianism, but it's, as Mahyar said, it's the response to that. So you can really sort of tell a country to, if we had racist incidents in the police, if the police officers weren't fired or they weren't called out, there wasn't a public outcry, yeah, you could argue that Britain probably is systemically racist. But the fact that every time there has an incident, there's always been an investigation and people are believing the sort of victims, whether it was a racist incident or not, it sort of proves that we're not a systemic country, I would argue.
Again, I want to ask on behalf of the audience, people out there who would say, okay, you mentioned the abolition of the slave trade, but is that enough, seeing as Britain was involved in the slave trade? Is it enough? Some people would say Britain got involved in it and then maybe they helped to abolish it. But is that something that you can carry through to today? And should we have the memories of these things in terms of the statues and other things that people are tearing down? Why shouldn't that happen if we realize that was a bad thing to do?
Well, the first part of the question, is it enough? What else should we do? The whole country, the history of this nation is that we went through that period. And since then, we've made all the progress that we've made. Every decade, every year, we're becoming better and better, up to a point where I can say, again, I can't really provide actual data on this because this is just based on what we see every day, that this country, generally speaking, is at least less racist and less intolerant than other countries that I see. I have cousins who live in Germany and other parts of Europe who experience prejudice more frequently than here. Even countries like Australia or America, for example. That's one thing. In terms of the progress we've made, yes, this country, historically, like any other country, people, especially from Black Lives Matter, always bring up the British Empire as if the British Empire was the only empire in the world. And yeah, at the same time, despite all that, we were the ones who led the movement to make all these changes. And since then, as I said, we can see that the data shows that the majority of the AME or non-white people are actually becoming, firstly, we have the freedom to do whatever we want. I came from a different country, from Iran, as a kid, and I'm able to do what I do in this country freely without having the government or any institution telling me that I'm not allowed to do it. That's evidence.
Now, are you just one of the few lucky ones who've managed to escape the system and you've made some friends in high places? What about the education system in the inner cities of this country that appear to many people to disadvantage those who haven't been born in a position of privilege and are able to attend these institutions that allow them into positions of power and privilege?
Well, was I one of the lucky ones? I mean, I was still, when I moved here, I still grew up in a council estate in Lewisham, went to a comprehensive Church of England as well. It wasn't one of the best schools at all. But that's the whole point. I experienced it because these specific areas and communities are the areas that are run by socialists. These are all labor areas. And this is why that's the biggest problem we have. The whole argument with Black Lives Matter, this whole discussion, institutional racism, it's not actually about skin color. They know that. They know it's basically class war. It's all about capitalism versus communism. That's all they care about. And yet, just like in America, I don't really want to discuss America, but it's the same thing there, where all these certain communities that are not doing well, they're all being run by Democrats. It's the same in the UK. It's all labor areas. We've got poor education system, poor schools, and obviously kind of local authorities who are not really competent enough to actually do things. And that's the biggest problem. Yet at the same time, luckily, overall, the system nationally is still good enough to create that ladder and opportunity for people, regardless of where you're actually from, to still come up. And we can come up. Look at the majority of people who are now running the FTSE 500 and FTSE, obviously, the big corporations these days, all came from working class backgrounds.
When you say Black Lives Matter is just about social status or whatever, however you phrased it, it's not about skin color.
Yep.
Where is your evidence for that?
Well, this one is easy. This is literally on their website, in their speeches, their rallies, their statements, all the letters they have, the leaflets. They say that they start the argument by saying that, you know, it's about white and black, it's all about skin color. But then they move on to, as you pointed out, certain communities and areas not doing as well. And they say that, well, the majority of successful and rich people and powerful people are white. But also the majority of white people are also not successful or rich or white. So the argument is not really skin color, it is about the political system. These are the same people who until very recently, a few years ago, their group was called something else, class war. They were the same people with the banners class war going around. They want communism. They have said they want to bring down capitalist system. They want to obviously defund the police. They want to completely, create these people's assemblies, which is not really. When I first heard it, I thought that's good because that's more like libertarian like me, localize, decentralize the power. But then I realized, no, it's more like Bane from Batman.
So when and I hear what you're saying, and I know people at home will hear that side of the argument, but they'll still ask themselves the question, is it not true that most of the people in government are of a certain education system? They're of a certain class. And it sounds like I'm asking you the question again, but I want to pin down
education.
What is exactly that is wrong with people saying this system of capitalism that seems to be promoted by the upper classes is what is holding down Black lives and people of BAME ethnicities. How do you respond to that? And why is that a bad thing to try and spread the wealth, if you like, and spread the opportunities?
The system did do that. The system did do that in the 18th century. Yes, it's true that you mentioned schools and education. There are areas and schools that are much better than the others. And a lot of them happen to either be independent schools, or there are still some good comprehensive schools in certain good areas, or there could be grammar schools. The issue is that you have two options. You could either, in the words of Boris Johnson, level up or level down. You could either try to make the poorer schools better, the poorer performing schools better, or you could bring down the top schools. That's what the BLM wants to do. They want to abolish independent schools, grammar schools, academies, free schools, and they want to make all education system equally poor. And that's the problem we have with the system, because they have said they want to have a revolution, and that's one of their intentions. If not everybody can become successful and rich, then no one should. And the data is that in terms of this country, we are still one of the best countries in terms of progress and also opportunity, because look at Parliament, for example. The members of Parliament at this point, this is the data that we have from the House of Commons itself, that 10% of MPs are now non-white. Obviously, the population is about 13%, so that's very close. The Labour Party itself, 25% of MPs are non-white. And in terms of education, we are now having more MPs in Parliament, our politicians, who came from kind of, let's just say, poorer schools, or comprehensive, for example. So that's already getting better and better every year. This is just part of evolution as humans. When you live in a free society, a free democratic capitalist free market society, you will automatically evolve. You don't even have to sit down and have a meeting, be like, let's fix the problems, because we just learn as we go on.
What do you say to people who say, okay, fair enough, you've said that, but what about trying to recompense or help the people who are disadvantaged? Maybe it's happened in the States. I know we're not talking about that. Reparations, doing something for the people who've been disadvantaged in the past by the system of slavery that caused some of the issues that we see. We know that here in the city of Birmingham, a lot of institutions, a lot of wealth was created from that trade. Why not take some of that and compensate some of these ethnic groups that have suffered historically?
I'm guessing the policy they're proposing is to dig up the graves, bring up the actual dead bodies and give them money. Because what happened in the past, it's got nothing to do with us. This argument that they always bring up is collectivism. And all of our ancestors experienced hardship somehow, whether it was based on skin color, or slavery, for example, whether it was just based on poor education system, poor healthcare, lack of freedom, lack of democracy. All of our ancestors went through hardship, and this is our past, obviously. Yes, we are connected to our past and ancestors, but at the same time, if you, as I said, if you live in a free democratic society that we have, doesn't matter about your past in terms of your ancestors, your family, or even technically speaking, where you're born. And this is the problem I had when I was growing up in Lewisham on a council estate. The reason I became what I am now in terms of politically, believing in freedom and opportunity was because of this, but because they kept telling people like me and everyone, all the kids, that, well, you live in this council estate in Lewisham, Southeast London, get used to it. There's no future for you. So if you keep going around telling kids when they grow up in those areas, keep repeating, brainwashing them, a lot of them are going to lose motivation. In reality, no, that's not true. You could still do whatever you want. Just work hard, study hard, behave, don't sell drugs, you'll be fine.
I think it's important. Sorry, can I jump in, Andrew? I think it's important to think as well in terms of reparations, how much are people actually trying to get and who's meant to be getting them? Is it people who are direct descendants of slaves, people who are BAME in Western countries? And again, it's the focus on it's only Western countries being asked to pay reparations. Countries all around the world had the slave trade. A single empire or country will have had a history of slavery at some point. And when we start looking into sort of these historical injustices, where do you draw the lines in terms of reparations? For example, sorry.
So that's the thing. So it's a good point, because you look at this country, how far do we go? Are we just talking about the last 100 years, 200 years because of the British Empire, or historically? Because, you know, if that's the case, then we should probably go to the Scandinavian countries and ask for money because of what they did, the Vikings to this country, or maybe the Romans. We should go to Italy, or the Spanish could go to the Islamic countries in the Middle East because they invaded them. Actually, the Persians could do the same with the Arab world as well. Every country had some sort of invasion, and in terms of slavery as well. We had recent ones, you know, again, I mentioned Spain and other countries as well. China, until the 20th century, they had the traditional version of slavery until the communist revolution, and now they have modern slavery. What is the point of reparation? Are we just, what's the number that will be enough? If we give all the money we have in the budget, trillions of pounds, to all the countries around the world, is that it? Have we now eliminated racism? Are we happy now? Can we move on? Probably not.
Okay, can I just switch slightly to what's happened recently with the pandemic? And we know that, especially in our city, in London, around the country, people who are Black and minority ethnic of that background have suffered more from the coronavirus pandemic. And what would you say to people who say this is an example of perhaps institutional racism, right? It's a question that comes up in that a lot of the people affected are the ones doing the jobs that maybe nobody else wants to do, and maybe they're not getting the same level of treatment for the NHS. I'm asking the question on behalf of the audience.
Of course.
So, what do you respond to allegations such as those?
Well, that's the other thing. So they always mention, for example, what happened with the pandemic and the BAME community being affected more, but they never actually explain what they mean. Because you try to obviously phrase the question in terms of, was it institutional conspiracy against them? Sometimes I think, because I don't explain it, I'm like, so wait, are you guys saying that people who are non-white are genetically weaker? Because that's also wrong. Or are you saying that politicians and governments sat down, had a conspiracy, and decided to just kill people who are non-white? That's also messed up.
Let me just phrase it like this. A lot of the messaging that was going out at the time, telling people to be safe and so on, and you know the precautions that we're going to take, the guidelines, something that came up in discussion was that there was not representation, and things were not said in ways that people from those backgrounds could understand, or perhaps in the languages, and people didn't see people of color giving the same messages, so perhaps the messages didn't come across.
Is that not? incredibly patronising as well to assume that people of colour can't speak English, especially if they're residing in the UK.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a valid argument to an extent, depending on what the problem is. If this was a minor problem, it's some sort of local project that, there was a lack of communication, misunderstanding, then yes, I understand. Especially, yes, there are some people who don't actually speak good English. This pandemic was so global and it was everywhere. The internet, TV, newspapers, word of mouth, regardless of language, everybody knew. And everybody knew the guidelines, regardless of, what parts of the world you're from. And the issue that we have is that, again, it's nothing to do with skin color or those local institutions aiming to ignore them. It's because certain cultures, and it's not just, again, skin color, because, again, parts of Scotland, north of Glasgow, that had a lot of cases because of the community, but they were white. The issue is, for example, there are a lot of communities, especially from the Middle East and other parts of the world, Southwest kind of Asian as well, where they live with big families in small houses. So, and a lot of these people also work in the NHS because, culturally speaking, especially Indians and Iranians, are taught as kids by their parents, you need to either become a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. So a lot of these people obviously working in the NHS, and then obviously went home. How likely is it to actually spread the actual virus across your house and your big family? That's just one, simplified example. But it's actually, I'm trying to say, firstly, it's a good sign that when it comes to the NHS, we have 20% of the staff who are from the BAME background. But it's a cultural thing. It's not a skin color. Culturally, certain communities live in big families. Also, kind of just obviously went around a lot at the beginning of the lockdown. I was living near Edgware Road when the lockdown happened, and I saw a lot of big families like just going on a trip to Sainsbury's together, saying hi to their neighbors. I'm like, oh God, guys, don't do it. And they all spoke English. The government did their best. It's not their fault.
So I have heard it said by people from those communities that they feel the NHS is racist. And you may laugh, but I've heard it said, and they would actually consider not going to the NHS unless they were absolutely, they had no other options because of some of the messaging that they get, and also because perhaps that's what's been instilled in them from a young age. It's something in some communities that the NHS isn't set up for people from their communities. Also, people who come across from other countries. There's a big debate about immigration, and then we saw that with the pandemic, they were celebrating a lot of the nursing staff, the NHS staff, a lot of whom were immigrants. So some of those people were saying, "Hey, don't celebrate us now that we're saving your lives when you've been kind of against us coming into this country." How do you respond to those kind of issues?
Well, I don't understand it, because the whole point of, firstly, the NHS, it goes back to the fundamental question, systemically or institutionally racist. This would have been great, obviously, if Sasha Johnson was obviously here tonight to discuss this, but unfortunately she's not. I hope she's well. The issue I have is that the NHS is literally one of the few institutions that is on their side, on the side of the BLM side, the left, and it's people on my side who actually want to reform it. It's because it's so bureaucratically, politically correct. You literally, I went to Lewisham Hospital a few times with my mom and a few others, and I've seen that they now have people working there, staff members who are not nurses, who would just translate. If you don't speak English, they will translate it, just like the Home Office or Job Centre. So the communication is there. Obviously, you could argue that there may be individuals in any institution, whether it's the police or the NHS or anywhere else, that could have prejudice, but there's no systemic guidelines being given to the staff of the NHS saying, guys, I know most of you are brown anyway, but when a brown patient comes, you need to mistreat them. No, that doesn't exist.
Okay, so we've come to about half an hour in the discussion at this point. I was going to open up to any questions that might have come through, but I don't know if any have come through. Jack, you'll be able to tell me.
So what I say, Andrew, so if we take this point to ask members of the audience, if you do have any questions to submit for the next 15 minutes, Maya will be more than happy. I'm assuming you're more than happy.
Are you happy, Maya, to do that, to answer some questions?
No, yeah, absolutely.
Happy.
Awesome. But if we have one more question from you, Andrew, while people sort of send them in, and then we'll go from there.
I have a series of questions of my own that I'd want to ask you, Maya, but I'll stick with just one. With all the protests and all the unrest that we've seen in this country, let's just stick with this country, statues being torn down, some violent clashes, some peaceful, lots of people in the middle of a pandemic when we're supposed to be socially distancing, getting together for something that they consider to be of a greater importance. If you could make, it's a question asked in the same way, but it's the same question. What's your solution to the current issues that we face with all of this? And if you could make one law that could stand for the next 10 years in order to resolve this, what would that be?
Well, the second one is easy. The one law is to stop making new laws. The governments and politicians stop making random laws. Just the fewer laws, the better. The less intervention that we have. But in terms of the movements that we've been seeing, especially with Black Lives Matter and the division that they have created themselves, and I'm saying it because they have said this themselves. Even Sasha Johnson and her friends been going around saying, Black power, Black supremacy, and because that's fine to say. In reality, supremacy is supremacy. And a whip is a whip. It doesn't matter whose hand it's in. That's a reality. And this is, for example, like yesterday, they had a so-called 1 million march in London. 100 people turned up. And it's because when Martin Luther King, back in the day, he preached the message of unity, regardless of your skin color. He brought people together. He managed to get 500,000 people out on the streets for that march. And the fact that obviously the Black Lives Matter in the UK are preaching division and segregation, obviously only 100 people turned up, not even the rest of them. I think the actual pro-segregation side managed to segregate their own side. So that's kind of not really helping their side either. So it's absolute nonsense. The best way to do this is, as Morgan Freeman and Martin Luther King and all these guys have said in the past, the best way to tackle this is to stop treating people based on their skin color or anything else. Treat people as individuals and their character, and just go with merit. That's all.
Okay. Jack, have we got any questions come through yet?
We do. We've got a few. So a few people have been asking you, what is your opinion on Dawn Butler?
Dawn Butler, one of our hardworking public servants who... So she's interesting. She's obviously a very, I was going to say very divisive figure, but I would say she's more of a soft, divisive figure. Sort of like David Lammy, not as bad as some of the Black Lives Matter activists. Because at the end of the day, they're now part of the establishment, people like Dawn Butler. She's clearly had her own agenda. Most people know what happened recently when she was stopped, in a car by the police. At first, she claimed that she was driving. Then obviously she wasn't. Then she said that they got stopped because they were black. And then we found out that the windows of the car was completely black, so you can actually see who's in the car. And so the police obviously, and the driver wasn't actually. Apparently, the driver was mixed race, but he wasn't. Obviously, he didn't seem as dark. Probably like lighter than me, so that's the whole thing. But people like her are hypocrites, and they are opportunists because they try to basically take advantage of any incident to turn it into some sort of tribalist and divisive battle, whether it's based on class or skin color or gender.
I think it's very telling with the whole Dawn Butler situation that she's not allowing the police to release the body cam footage as well, which could either prove her story if it was institutional racism or essentially undermine it. But awesome. On to the next question is a question from Julian Dario. So what are your thoughts on a basic universal income or yearly dividend to all British adults? Wouldn't that help address inequalities and also help raise money that citizens can use to boost the economy?
Universal basic income. Well, why stop there? Why not just abolish jobs, and why not just abolish capitalism and just give free money to everyone? These are sort of like ideas and policies that come out of people who don't understand economics, and it makes absolutely no sense. We have had experiments, we've had trial runs for this project in different countries. Doesn't work. And not just that, you don't have to actually have a trial to see it doesn't work. It's morally wrong to steal money from people and give it to other people. And in this case, actually, you're stealing it from people and giving it to the same people. Because the whole point of the free market system that we have, the whole thing is based on incentive and motivation. You wake up in the morning, and I'm not just talking about the money part of it, just life. We are humans. You wake up, you need to have some sort of objective in life to actually spend your day. I remember during the lockdown, the first couple of weeks, it was fun. I was just just having fun, doing nothing. After a couple of weeks, life becomes boring. You still need some sort of mission in life. And if you just give free money to everyone, firstly, economically, it's not sustainable. Secondly, motivation will go down, which means people won't be hungry enough to come up with new ideas, innovative ideas, create new businesses, which actually help us all. The best way to fix it, the best way to level up, as Boris says, is to actually get politicians out of economics, out of our lives, allow a actual free market system for people to have the opportunity to have good jobs, to start their own businesses.
What about, Maya, if you don't mind me asking on behalf of those who would ask, what about those who they're just disadvantaged in society? They're not able, they've got challenges, whether they're physical or they're just, they're, I don't know what the politically correct word is. They're just not able-bodied.
Sure.
Where's the compassion in all that? I mean, where's the room for I use a soft word, for love and compassion for your fellow man? How is it that this is the challenge, isn't it, that people have, the disparity between the wealthy and those who have and those who have not? Where is room for that in what you were describing?
Well, firstly, that's a very, very obviously specific case to bring up, obviously, people who are not, people who are disabled, for example, who can't physically work, depending on your, obviously, disabilities. A lot of people are disabled who can work and do work. Professor Hawkins, that's one. But at the same time, I can compromise. I can still have a safety net for people who literally can't do anything. That's absolutely fine. I'm talking about people who are able to get out, have a job, study hard, have family, live their lives, and help their communities. The best way to show compassion is to actually do what you have to do in your life. And for example, the free market system, it automatically rewards both sides. So if you come up with a new product that will save people, for example, you're actually helping humanity more than you going on a march and say, I'm compassionate and I'm a socialist. I can't really help you, but I can say I'm compassionate. That's meaningless. Words are meaningless. Intentions is just meaningless. You have to go with politics of outcome. And this is why communism and socialism will always fail.
Awesome. Right. So we've got a question from Sue Grucock. So thoughts on universities and schools as a whole promoting left-wing thinking and culture, and then the recent promotion of the lecturer at Cambridge who was outspokenly sort of against white people. So she said she had to resist the urge to kneecap white men, I believe, and other tweets.
I missed the first part of the question.
So she said thoughts on universities and schools as a whole.
Yeah. This is the thing. So the people on the BLM side, or obviously the communist side, who claim that the institutions are against them. In reality, since the Second World War, we've seen the hard left, when they realized that they can't beat the right at the ballot box, they decided to infiltrate all our institutions, from academia, media, and obviously now the actual political system, the establishment, civil service, for example. So academia is actually completely under their control, with the majority of professors and people obviously in the management. They have become not just woke, but just out of control. So you have a situation where I have a friend who I can't name, he's at a university in London, King's College, There was a professor who just wrote an article who just seemed controversial. It really wasn't. It was just about the past. And he got fired. Yet this woman who's now blocked me on Twitter, I can't remember her name, who's been tweeting about how white people should die, they should be slaves, they're evil. She got promoted in Cambridge. There is I don't know how to counter this, because we always say that from the right, from my side, oh, we should try and take over the academia. Well, how are we going to do that? Are you going to force your friends to become professors? It's not easy to do that. I think the best way to do is to just keep debating on university campuses, on social media, on the streets, on the beaches, everywhere, to actually make sure that we win the battle of ideas, because the center right in this country have been losing the battle of ideas. We might be winning elections, but we're losing the battle of ideas.
Awesome. We have a question from Melinda Bethel. Do you think that Black Lives Matter have harmed race relations? She says that her kids are currently scared of Black people now because of the marching in the news. So I don't know if you saw sort of the Forever Family going along in paramilitary gear. And she thinks it's been a big step backwards. How would you?
Well, to be fair, this was always their intention. It's not like it was accidental. They've been saying at their protests and their speeches that this is about race wars. They say Black power. They want a revolution. They want white people to be inferior because it's their turn to be slaves, apparently. They want to defund the police because apparently the police are majority white and against them. They are dividing. If someone like Martin Luther King was alive now, he would not be too happy about this, because as I said earlier, people like him fought hard, campaigned hard to make sure that we reach the point where we don't see each other based on our skin color, and you just see people as people. But these people, this is what they want. This is the agenda from the far left, is to cause chaos, to bring down the whole system. And by system, it's not just politics. We're talking about the actual society, in order to start from scratch, do the reset button and rearrange society. That's how they can achieve their goal, because they can't do it democratically. They can't have a political party and say, guys, if you vote for me, and when we're in power, we're going to kill the bankers. No one's going to vote for that. So they're going to have to cause chaos, anarchy, to bring down society, and then start from scratch, and probably have local courts, kangaroo courts, and start hanging people. This is what they want.
Maya, can I just ask you a question to clarify for anyone who's wondering? People hear words like hard left and Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Marxism, and all these things. They think, hang on a minute, what have Black people got to do with the hard left? And what does hard left even mean? So for somebody who's listening out there thinking, what on earth have these issues got to do? We're talking about Britain being institutionally racist. What has that got to do with hard left and Marxism and some of these other things you've mentioned? Where is the evidence for that?
Well, so firstly, you asked, what's it got to do with Black people, far left, or any of this? Well, it doesn't. That's why the majority of Black people are not supporting Black Lives Matter. This is not a actual issue with people who are non-white. The whole point of it is that the left, generally speaking, have always been very good with language, and they've always been winning the battle of language. So they come up with certain phrases and names, and they embrace them. Compassion is one of those that you mentioned earlier, and equality, the word equality for some reason. So if you try to argue against the policy that they are providing under the umbrella of equality or compassion, then that they say, that means you hate people. That means you don't like compassion. Same applies to Black Lives Matter. The branding is Black Lives Matter. So if you argue against the organization, that means you don't like Black people. This is the far left, by the far left, I'm talking about the original Marxists and communists who take advantage of people, whether everybody, young people, non-white people, over the last few years, Muslims who come to the West, they try to take advantage of them. They tell them, you are a victim and I'm your savior, support me, and I'll make your life better. In reality, that's not going to happen.
I think as well, it's important to note at the sort of BLM marches to highlight that they are sort of run by the far left. The majority of people at a lot of these marches aren't actually black. It's middle class white liberals who are trying to stir up division. And you can see this as well, because they claim to sort of defend all black people, all Black Lives Matter, unless you're a black conservative or a black police officer. Again, there was no outcry over the killing of a black police officer at a Black Lives Matter demonstration in the US. And so it's very clear that it's not actually so much about race relations, and it's more about sort of far left ideology. And
have you got any evidence that points to what you're saying, that most black people don't support Black Lives Matter? Or
so
that
I would say on the marches, just
people go to find this information? Because obviously Sasha's not here to be able to present the other side. So where can people go to try and get a different, or to try and research what you're saying?
But the latest opinion poll that was done by YouGov 3-4 weeks ago, you can Google it, based on the debate on statues and Black Lives Matter, how many people supported, only 7% of black people, sorry, that was different, 13% supported the whole thing, and 7% said, yeah, we should bring down the statues as well. So that's, you know, I know it's just a survey, but that's obviously that's how you get the stats overall. And the fact that you don't see millions of black people actually marching. You had 100 people today, and the majority were white. The majority of the people in charge of the Black Lives Matter are white. They've launched a new party yesterday called something TTIP, like Taking the Initiative, which makes absolutely no sense. And it says it's going to be a black-led party, which is also racist. But then the people who are helping managing it are middle-class, white, spoiled kids. I'm like, okay, good luck with that.
Awesome. Let's move on to the next question. So someone's asked, if the UK is a racist place, is there any nation which wouldn't be defined as racist? And what's sort of your utopian view as such from there?
If Britain is racist, what country is not racist? Or?
Yeah, so I guess it's sort of from that they're implying if Britain, with everything sort of put in place to help people and bridge racial divides, is racist, is there any country which isn't racist? Probably.
And Mahyar, before you answer that question, I know it's might seem obvious, but when people say racist, what do you think that means?
I mean, that's a good point, because it's been defined differently. For me, obviously, a prejudice based on any other human, if it's based on skin color, that's racism. But from my definition, trying to make turn and shift any debate and argument and bring up race, that's also racist. Just because you're having a discussion about economics and then you say, oh, you can't say that because you're not black, for example, or brown, that's also a racist element. But yeah, treating people differently based on their skin color, that's racist, regardless of if it's based on being superior or inferior. To answer the question of which country, I'll probably say it's not a country, but Mars is probably not racist, because no one's there. There are racist people everywhere. That's just part of
the country.
And prejudice is part of human beings, and prejudice has different levels. It's not just racism. Prejudice goes with because we're all tribal, and we are protective. Sometimes when you're on a night out, you're on your group, and some random person from a different group randomly comes and say hi, you're automatically defensive. So that's the soft side of it. Then if you're bad, then yes, there's a higher level, which is you will hate people based on their gender, based on skin color, based on their height, their weight, or the level of income they make, and that's always going to be there. But you can try to make the whole society and country better, and we have already done that in the UK. We're the most tolerant country in the world and most open-minded and welcoming. And the fact that, as I said, the three of us, and not Sasha, because she's not here, are able to have this debate here tonight in a free society is a good sign.
And I think
more questions, Jack? Any more questions?
Yeah, so we'll go for this as the last question.
And we'll sum up if we can, if that's okay.
Yep. And so Patrick Gilbride, apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong, said the most important question he thinks is, who do you think are funding all these protests, news articles and political action groups?
There's a lot of, because this is actually quite open, they've already said, certain, obviously, groups that were linked to Momentum and also to Hope Not Hate, they've all been obviously supporting each other. They're not really open about the rest of their donations. We know that there have been groups and individuals who are anti-Semitic, who are obviously anti-white, anti-men. All these, like, as I said, your traditional far left groups who have been established for the past few years, Class War, Hope Not Hate, all these guys. That's why when they have a protest, they have all these random flags and banners just turning up for no reason. There's a protest about Black Lives Matter, and there's a flag of Palestine. And I have absolutely no idea. Good luck going to Palestine if you're black. See what happens to you there. So this is a weird coalition of weirdos who, you know, either been spoiled as kids or just can't move on because they had some sort of hardship. We've all had hardship, most of us. I had hardship. I'm not going to use myself as a victim. This is a victimhood mentality, and they need to just grow up.
So thank you, Mahyar. It's unfortunate that Sasha wasn't able to make it this evening to be able to put her side across, or put her points across in response to this question. Try to raise some questions that people raise these days, perhaps not the ones that she might have asked. But for all the things that have been mentioned, I know there'll be links provided. You can go and do the research yourself. You know, I just want to thank Mahyar for his time, and thank you, Jack, for putting on this important discussion. I want to encourage everyone who's listening to go away and do a bit of your own research and find out for yourself these issues going on so you can make an informed decision and read around the different sources. Don't just take one person's word for it. But in conclusion, it would be good. I would have asked Sasha if she could sum up in about a minute or so her conclusion, having heard everything that's been said, but she's not here, unfortunately. So I'm going to turn to you, Mahyar, and just say, can you sum up for anybody who maybe has joined the discussion late on in the day, or they just want to have a summation of everything that's been said, of all the things that have been mentioned. Going back to the question, is Britain institutionally racist? Is this, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so if you can just go for it for a minute or so, just give your response in conclusion to the debate tonight.
No, Britain is not an institutionally racist country. We discussed tonight how we are not perfect creatures on this planet. There is no such thing as perfection or utopia. There are always going to be problems, always going to be hardship, but you could obviously aim to make you, your life, and your society better and improved. And we are doing that in the West. It's the West, the free democratic West, that are making all this progress, not the other continents and countries, especially the country I came from, Iran. So we're able to fix our own mistakes in the past and everything else and evolve. So look at the positives. Don't ignore the problems. Always fix the problems. There are always bad individuals everywhere. But as Andrew said, actually, the whole point of learning about political discussions, cultural debates, anything else in life is about reading and listening to all sides, not just one side, and then obviously doing your own research independently and forming your argument. And the one thing I could say is, if you're trying to learn about something, a topic, and early on, and you're reading a source or something, and if you get emotional, if it makes you feel any sort of feeling, that's not good. That's not where you have to stop. You have to find the opposite side, because that would cloud your judgment. You have to make sure that when you're forming your opinion, it's more based on actual facts and reason rather than how you felt in that moment, because there is a lot of things that makes you feel good or sad, but that can't just cloud your judgment. That's all I can say. This is a great country. We are great people. Keep it free. Keep it safe. Subscribe and share.
Thank you, Mahyar. Thank you, Turning Point. I'm going to pass on to you, Jack, and you can tell us what will go on from here. And for all those who've tuned in, thank you for your time this evening. Over to you, Jack.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pastor Andrew. We really appreciate you coming on tonight and being a neutral source to provide a bit of balance. Thank you as well, Mahyar, for coming on tonight as well. I'm sure our audience has really appreciated having you here, and we definitely have at Turning Point too. We'll be ending the broadcast shortly, but thank you everyone for tuning in. I'd just like to say it's a shame that Sasha didn't come along, but the invitation is there to any sort of left-wing, socialist, communist, whatever, who wants to come on to Turning Point and debate us or a conservative personality. We're very happy to accommodate that, and the offer is always there to you. So I hope all of you enjoyed tonight. There's lots of food for thought. And yeah, you can follow Mahyar on Twitter or YouTube, and just Google him. You should be able to find him. But thank you again to both of you for coming along tonight. And thank you everyone for tuning in.